welcome back. Again, got to thank the sponsors because they paid for lunch. CMAC, Cordic, iCabby and Minicabit. Now then, I made a mistake this morning. I said that Shoot Business, the camera guys, were just filming us and somebody else would do the edit. I was wrong. Shoot Business are doing the whole shooting match, so they're the full suite. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming back. Tell you, we're really glad to see you. We always are. Right, okay, so the morning session, we covered the shortage of taxi and private hire vehicle drivers, some of the causes, some of the cures. And as I mentioned this morning, those problems, they are resolvable, but we've got to work together, we've got to work smarter. And both the panel and the audience came up with some great solutions. If we can avoid the adverts for your business, that would be really great. Understand why it's done, but it takes lots of time, and frankly, we've got other things that we need to do. But what was really important was the can-do spirit. There were lots of people who said, yeah, this is tough. Yep, we've been here before. And we've come through, and we'll keep coming through. So that was great. The afternoon session is going to cover the very important Department for Transport's taxi and private hire vehicles best practice guidance consultation, which is live until the 20th of June. And the two sessions that we've done this morning and this afternoon are highly connected and very timely. And due to the LPHCA's lobbying efforts, many of the overly bureaucratic and, we believe, unnecessary requirements are up for your responses. And we've said it 3 times that I know of. Your views really matter. And I was the head of sustainable transport for the Scottish Government. I wrote the consultations that went out to businesses. And as a civil servant, I remember thinking, I wish people would tell us what they actually want, what they genuinely think, because it allowed me to make better policy. So it really does matter. Following this session, we're going to go back. So the exhibition will still be there for a short time afterwards. And then, oh yes, up in the mezzanine, there's going to be a bar. I don't know why I'm excited, I don't drink. But anyway, and then there'll be a further hotel bar gathering later and a meal in the restaurant if you're interested. Okay, so we're going to do the forum. Who wasn't here this morning? Hand in the air if you wouldn't mind. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, 5, 6. Okay, I'm very quickly going to whistle through this. Here are our panel of speakers. They will introduce themselves. They will tell you who they are. They've got about 3 minutes to speak on their chosen subject. Once they are all done, Steve will summarise, our chairman, and once he's summarised, we'll go into Q&A, because the most important part of this is you, and you having your voice, and you asking these panel of experts questions. Once that's done, it's bar time. Okay? Everybody happy? If you ask a question in the Q&A session, there'll be 2 people, one either side, who has one of these talking sticks. Talking stick will be brought to you. Tell us who you are, who you work for, and your question, and ideally, who you'd like to ask the question of from our esteemed panel of guests. Happy? Shall we? Okay, Steve, can you talk us through the consultation?
Yes, I'll give you a quick whistle-stop tour of this 99-page document that colleagues here from the Department for Transport have put together. It's a very, very good document. This session covers an important consultation by the department on their best practice, which is put towards councils and needs the input of the trade very, very heavily. So it's very, very important that by 20th of June, you do take the time and trouble to respond to this consultation and you consider it. There are a lot of things in here, and I'll whistle through some of the things that are covered. We decided not to do death by PowerPoint, and I think this is an easier thing, so I've written them down. Driver licensing, proficiency and enforcement, vocational training and assessment, including the question of extra driver tests, point-based enforcement systems, and topographical knowledge tests for PHV drivers. Vehicle licensing will cover tinted windows rules, which I've said a great deal about, so I won't go on about that too much now. Identification, signage and livery, seating capacity, CCTV, vehicle testing, age limits, and notices between drivers and passengers. That's just a summary of what's in this massive document and some of the things I've picked out to just mention here. Such consultations are very rare. I think it was 2010, the last one, and or it might have been 2012. Somebody's nodding 2010, so it was right. It's really an opportunity you've got to respond to. You've got to give your input, and they're also looking for input from the public as well, which they've made very clear on other forums that I've been at. The panel are now going to speak on just a few of these matters, and just to show how silly rules and silly regulations actually cause the industry a great deal of problems, which are very much linked into the difficulties getting drivers with all the other problems the industry have had. So they would include, bits and pieces that are very, very pertinent and will demonstrate exactly some of the problems that exist out there. Also, on the positive side, there are measures that we will suggest and measures that have been put in place by licensing authorities that make our life easier. Our industry is in crisis due to supply and demand. We cannot meet passenger demand. People are being unable to get vehicles late at night. There's all manner of problems in the industry, and we're hoping that the government best practice guidance will take account of these problems and take account of the difficulties that we've had since the pandemic. So that's a bit of an overview. Do download or contact the LPHCA if you want links to the document. I'd implore you and beg you to read it through. You've got 6 weeks, but you need to do it now. You need to have a look at things, because there's things that are going to be decided upon in the government's guidance to licensing authorities that everyone in this room can have an influence on. So that's the reason for the second panel today. So it's over to you, John.
Thank you, Steve. Just briefly, just to say he's right. And we saw that this morning. The poll said national standards really important. Your view counts. Andy Mahoney, busy writing his lines there, I see. Andy, you're up. Can we take that one, Stacey? There you go. Go on, trust it.
Cheers. Yes, I'll trust it.
There you go.
Well done. So, Andy Mahoney, 24/7. We specialise in special needs transport. Have just over 5,000 special needs children that we take to school every day throughout the country. We're one of many operators that do the same. And we have similar problems to most taxi operators, except we work in a specialist industry, an industry where we're regulated with school children, so we have to have 2 DBSs, slightly different. Anybody that takes children to school should have a second DBS, child and vulnerable adults. We struggle to license drivers. We struggle to meet the industry requirements. We struggle because we take children that are outside that of the norm a lot of the time. And in saying that, there can be some pretty simple things that we struggle with, like size of vehicle. Where you've got a child that has got a spatial awareness problem, can only travel in an 8-seater car on their own, and another child, maybe the same age, go to the same school and everything else, has got a similar spatial awareness problem, but they can only travel in the smallest of cars. The smallest of cars that a licensing department won't license. And yet another one, 200 miles away, will license. So then, we've got to license a couple of drivers 200 miles away, take a car 200 miles, run it in an area where a licensing authority have got no jurisdiction over our vehicle driver because they won't do it. And these are the sort of things that we've got to get over. We've got to get over all of these problems with the new consultation doc. So my appeal to everybody is to go through the consultation doc and have a look, but look at it with an open mind as well. Special needs kids are a real important part of our society. In actual fact, all children are. And companies that take special needs children and mainstream children to school, they're a valuable, valuable part. Lots of taxi companies don't want to do it. And you can understand why they don't want children kicking off and keeping the drivers busy, by not going anywhere for 10, 15 minutes in the morning when there's a driver crisis. We need to slim down on what we're asking drivers to do. Can't be asking them to do two of everything, 2 DBSs, 2 lots of training. Why are we asking in some areas that they've got to go to school in a white car with a black bonnet? Must have a sign on the side, mustn't have a sign on the side. And that's just really where I think that the consultation document ought to be looking at. And I think it is largely, but I think we all need to look at the consultation document and actually go through it. It's a serious document, it's our future. It's the future of every taxi company. There is a serious driver shortage out there. The only way of doing anything with this serious driver shortage is for everybody to get together and actually make it easier without risking safeguarding to licence people. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months to licence somebody is not good enough. It can't continue to happen. The industry's on its knees. We've got special needs children that don't go to school. And we've also got young ladies of the night that can't go home. An airport that's got very, very few drivers because they can't get them licensed. When I say very few drivers, the international airport with 40 drivers. How can that be right? And it's only the licensing authorities that can help us out. DFT, please give guidance. Please just help slim down the long waits and the risk to everybody of not licensing, especially that of special needs children. Thank you.
Cheers, Andy. Thank you. Well said. Joe, I bring you the talking stick. There you are, my friend.
Thank you. I'm Joe Poley from Parker Cars. The thing that I want to talk about really is about how we are subject to policy and policy makers, and how their lack of flexible thinking can just affect not just us, but the people that depend upon us. So yeah, my thing is about some disabled vehicles we bought a year ago that we're still trying to get licensed. These are wheelchair accessible vehicles. They're VW Caravels. The only vehicles that can actually do this kind of work, but they're not zero emission capable, so TfL won't license them. And actually, we've been tracking their stats for the last year, and TfL already has a pitiful amount of PHV vehicles that can carry a wheelchair. I think it was about, back in August, it was about 580 out of 70 or 80,000 drivers, which is terrible in the first place. But each quarter when they publish their figures, those figures just going down and down. And I think now it's down to 490 vehicles that can carry a wheelchair. And of the vehicles that are licensed, there's almost nothing that's new. Some of the vehicles are like 15 years old that the TfL fleet have, and they're essentially creating a 2-tier system where those customers, those passengers that need our services the most, those that don't have the choice to jump on a bus or walk home or make their own way, their supply is just drying up. And whatever we kind of say to TfL, they just can't seem to change their policy, despite the fact actually it's actually affecting those that kind of need us the most. And it's just a complete kind of intransigence in having a policy that was actually cooked up back in 2015 when we didn't really know what the future held. And now we can see that there is, of the larger vehicles, there's very, very little available that is zero emission capable. And just now, 1 or 2 vehicles that are electric, that are just starting to come out now. But, I mean, even the zero-emission capable, I think it's the Transit, it doesn't even pass their CO2 requirements. So, yeah, we just really need our policymakers to actually make good policy and not just, stick to some bureaucratic criteria they set, half a decade ago. So that's all, really.
Bless you, Joe. Right, now, if there was ever a more Welsh name than Geth Jones, I don't know what it is. Tell me you're Welsh.
I was actually born in England.
Golly, what a mistake to make.
But a more Welsh name than Geth Jones would be Geth Thomas. I was raised in Wales.
Geth.
Anyway, John, anyway.
Jones and Thomas, I'm from the Rhondda Valley, my friend. And I should have got that right. I didn't get it right, did I? I'm sorry.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you to the LPHCA for this afternoon's opportunity. I run a chauffeur company. I've been in the private hire trade since 2012. And as Joe was just saying about policies, I'm struggling with a policy from 2008 about plate exemption, how it's total bonkers. So in Wales, private hire has devolved power to Wales. We have 22 unitary authorities making policies in Wales with licensing powers. The population of Wales just slightly more than the population of Birmingham. There's almost more sheep in Wales than people. The policy from 2008 isn't working. And I've been liaising with the LPHCA, and here we are today. So I implore, if there's a common thread through today, it's licensing. The industry is on its knees, it's been said, lack of drivers, lack of vehicles, lack of support and understanding from licensing. So I'm here today to ask for support. Licensing needs to move into the 21st century, because in 2008, when this policy was written, we didn't have the likes of apps on phones for booking. We didn't have ride sharing. We didn't have ULEZ and congestion charges, and the whole industry has moved forward apart from licensing. Over the weekend, I've just moved house. I'm married with 3 teenage kids, 10 minutes down the road. Now we need planning permission for the new house, even though we had everything at the old address. It's just a scheme to put obstacles in the way, a nonsense scheme when the rules are so different 10 miles down the road in neighbouring authorities. My competitors have an advantage because of geography where they live. We need national standards. As Johnny suggested this morning with a straw poll, the whole room said national standards. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Geth. Let's just take that back, and apologies for getting your name wrong. Rush of blood to the head. Stacey Locke. Did I get that right?
You did.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Stacey Locke. I'm from 51 Taxis, which is East Anglia. My licence and authority is part of Suffolk. They're called East Suffolk, and I'm here to talk about driver training. So with our new standards, our licence and authority has brought in training for drivers, which is both for new drivers to the trade and current drivers who are going to renew their badge. So as part of this, they all have to do a 2-day full course of driver training, which is basically an introduction to the role of being a taxi driver. So I've got some drivers who have driven me for 10 years, I've got some that have driven me for 20 years. They still have to undertake the same course as a new driver who wants to obtain his badge. So some of the things that's contained within the training are very, very simple, mundane things where we're telling driver how to suck eggs, so to speak. So telling driver whether they need to wear a seatbelt or not, telling them whether it's okay to take drugs or not, which we all know and they're all well aware of. They are trained to deal with risk assessment, and as part of this risk assessment, there are things in there like having headaches and what you would do if you had a headache, which we should all be well aware of. It's not something that needs to be taught to drivers, whether they're new or current. Drivers have to do it upon renewal of their licence, their current one. So they are taking 2 days off work. They are also having to pay for the pleasure to do it. So not only are they paying for the renewal of their badge, they'll be paying for an additional fee, which our authority is £150 for the 2 days. We have, in our county, we have 6 different licensing authorities. They all have different rules, they all have different regulations, and it's the same assessor who is teaching between all of them. Every single rule for each different one is in the course, and I think there's notes at the back which they give them which tells them which one applies to them, which one doesn't. So potentially they're learning things that are not relevant, that are not regulations that apply to them in the authority that they're working along. And not only that, because it is so new at the moment, they actually are, because they have to do it to obtain the renewal, or they have to do it to get their new badge, there isn't enough spaces available or being taken up for them to actually do this training course. So, for instance, as a private hire operator, I also have to undertake this course. There isn't a private hire operator course. I have to sit in on the taxi role of a taxi driver. I have tried for the last 5 months to get onto the course. They have to fill at least 16 places, and I have not been able to do it once yet. So the question is, and this is something I've asked my authority, how long do we wait? If we can't get onto this course, can a driver renew their badge? So potentially you're not only stopping drivers getting into the trade, because you're asking them to fulfil something that they cannot fulfil because you're not able to provide that for them, but you're also making it compulsory for them to do that to obtain their badge. So we have a huge obstacle in the way of drivers, both coming into the trade and renewing badges. I mean, we've got, I think, 10 drivers within the next 3 months that are renewing their badges, and I think 8 out of the 10 are actually thinking about going to do something else because having to do a training course, what they feel is just, something they do day in, day out. They live and breathe it every single week. They do not need to be told how to wear a seatbelt. They do not need to be told how to put luggage into the boot of a car. They're given the policies and the regulations that they have to be aware of to obtain their licence. They don't need to sit in front of somebody who has no taxi background and be told once again. So that's a huge thing for us that we are having to help drivers with, having to advise on. And actually, to be fair, I haven't got a lot of the answers because I haven't been given the answers from my licensing authority. I spoke to the assessor a few weeks ago, and as I said, I've 5 months now, I'm still waiting to actually sit on one of the courses to I've actually obtained my operator's licence, even though I shouldn't have done because I haven't done the training. But, when drivers are asking me questions, I can't answer it. Our licensing authority can't answer it. And it's going to get to the point where these drivers can't renew their badges, or you're going to get new drivers who don't want to come into the trade because it is so difficult. And it's an extra cost as well. Where we are, they are looking around the 600 mark as a new driver to obtain a badge, as well as all the original obstacles they have to, do to come into the trade. On top of that, you're another £150. So you're looking around the £750 mark. That's a lot of money for an unskilled, what they class as an unskilled job. I mean, if you Google unskilled job, taxi driver is one of the top ones. But actually, they're not unskilled because there's lots of things that, they do in, day out, but they don't need to be told how to suck eggs. They don't need to be told how to do their job when they have done it for 10 years. We're all for training. We're all for, ensuring safety, and they're all well aware of laws and regulations. That helps us as operators. We don't want the rigmarole of the complaints and the issues, but things need to be relevant. They need to be relevant to the trade. They need to be relevant to drivers, and it needs to assist them and help them, not hinder them, basically. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Well done, Stacey. Thank you. And we found through COVID that those people who are unskilled, in inverted commas, are the people we depend on most. Nothing different here. John Garforth.
Thank you. John Garforth, Vice Chairman of the Institute of Licensing and a local authority licensing manager here in Greater Manchester. I think from the other panellists up here today, I think the golden thread running through this, similar to what was discussed this morning, is the need for reform and the need for those national standards. Here, we've been hearing differences in approach, in time waiting, in policy, in inflexibility. And whilst I won't agree with everything that everyone said, having come from a local authority myself, in 18 years as a licensing manager, I can see the frustration. And I think that's where things like the hopefully incoming standards at some point, and the best practice guidance, and the statutory guidance from the statutory state can all help push us all into the same arena, rather than all rowing in different directions. The best practice guidance is a very detailed and comprehensive and welcome update of a document that is already 12 years old probably, and the size of the new document shows the effort that's gone in from colleagues at the DFT to make it a lot more helpful, which is welcome. There is, it doesn't cover all areas of licensing, which I think I'd like it to see. It doesn't say in itself that it doesn't, but I think that can be looked at. But there are some controversial things in there, such as potentially adopting the TfL way of doing things for vehicles, of not having livery on vehicles. What we mustn't forget in all this, and whilst I appreciate the trade want to level playing field, is that public safety comes first and public protection runs through everything that we do in licensing, not just in private hire and taxi licensing, but in all the different licenses that councils issue, else there would be no need for a licensing regime. There are other things like age limits, which I'm sure the trade may well find benefit to, the review of whether age limits are needed on licensed vehicles. I would just like to comment on a couple of things that Stacey said. Driver training is important. Driver training is a really integral part of inducting a new driver. There will be occasions where you have to update the information that you wish to impart to existing drivers, and it could be argued that does that person then need to go through everything that they've already been taught in the past? Possibly not. But it is important. I've got plenty of examples of where I've had my officers or myself, when I used to do it, run our training courses and not be aware of some of the basics, having been licensed drivers for a good number of years. So, for example, a private hire driver not realising that when he was not with a passenger, he had to wear his seatbelt. That, despite having window stickers on a vehicle saying no smoking, he thought that didn't apply to him, and I could go on. So I think there are lots of situations where drivers do need reminding of what the rules are, but that needs to be done proportionally and reviewed and work with the trade on what they think they need to be updated on. Although there will be some that will just be a given that are there. But just to summarise, it's a really good document. I think it needs some response to, which I hope you'll all give. And I hope that we see the final version of that this year, so we can start reviewing policies locally and working together as licensing authorities to make sure we get the best possible policies going forward.
Brilliant.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Steve, anything further to add?
Yeah, just in a bit of summary. First of all, I'd like to thank all the panellists today, mostly comprising of LPHCA members, but it's quite right and proper that we actually hear the voice of the regulatory authority, a local regulatory authority. I'm very grateful to John, who we've worked with very closely with the Transport for Manchester on air quality and their minimum standards and their coordinated standards. They are very positive. They do listen, which is very, very important. And I think he used a very interesting word today, just now, proportionate. What we need is proportionate training. What we need is appropriate training. We don't need people trained in things that they're never going to be doing. We don't need things from the dark ages like private hire vehicle tests. The Law Commission in 2014 recommended that they shouldn't be doing it. Many licensing authorities are now phasing them out. It is a pre-booked situation. Technology's moved on a long way from when I started with the two-way radio and the Geographer's Master Atlas of London. Things have changed. And things need to be proportionate and things need to be appropriate. The tinted window policies makes me weep of some licensing authorities who are insisting that they need to be able to see into a private hire vehicle. Well, there's actually a clue in the name of what we're doing. It's called private in front of hire vehicle. And many people actually want privacy in private hire vehicles, and it's certainly something we want to see. You know, this madness of taking out environmentally friendly windows that reduce emissions because they reduce the air conditioning requirement, smashing them to bits as scrap and then replacing them with windows that are going to microwave the passengers is the biggest nonsense of all time. It's things like this that have got to go. Now, although Geoff is from Welsh Wales, as he's made very, very clear, and the best practice guidance covers England, the principles are much the same because the devolved countries do take a lot of steed of what the Department for Transport put out and the Minister puts out, and although these powers are devolved. And the nonsense he's had with plates on his vehicle, I just must tell you about this. I mean, they're saying you can't be an executive vehicle if you take somebody to a pub. If you want to be an executive vehicle and have plate exemption, you need to supply us with all the contracts of your suppliers to prove that you don't do cash work. Why can't you do cash work? This sort of nonsense has got to stop. I mean, he didn't go on, I thought he might go into one today about this. He's had an absolute nightmare with not being able to take work. It's anti-competitive. It belongs in the dark ages. And I'm hoping that we can get through into the best practice guidance. And I know from having given us evidence to the National Assembly for Wales and having had dialogue with Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Transport Ministers, that they will look at what happens in England. And because of devolution, we are under different regimes. But I do think that the DFT have taken a good lead with England that obviously licenses more taxis and private hire vehicles than anywhere. We need to get rid of inappropriate training and testing, and we need to get also something that's really, really awful. It's a massive variation in licensing costs. Some people are paying extortionately for their licenses, and other people are paying far less. Well, why should a particular operator that's running a business be subject to massive, great big costs that are all down to the inefficiency of the licensing authority? All these things have got to change. And the best practice guidance does offer us a great route, and it's a great document. I'd like to thank the 4 DFT colleagues that have come up and are in the room today for getting this document out. Politicians, they will tell you, will always say, well, yeah, it's coming at Christmas. They just don't tell you what Christmas. And this one's been coming for about 5 Christmases. So I'm really pleased that it's out. I'm really pleased that they're here today. And now it's down to you to, when we do this question session, to actually let us know the difficulties, let us know the comments, ask the panel questions, and that would be very appreciated. Last thing, if anybody asked a question this morning, can we give somebody else a chance this afternoon, because there's only limited time. Thank you all for coming and being part of what we're doing. Over to you again, John.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you. Before we do, the consultation, who has completed it thus far? Anybody? Okay. That speaks volumes because they're boring consultations. They're really dull unless you're sitting in government and thinking, what the hell do we do now? How do we get it right? You cannot hold the politicians accountable and the civil servants accountable if you don't tell them. What was really interesting was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different speakers all took a different view on the consultation process and what was going to come out of it. They all have their own vested interests. Multiply that out across this room. I guarantee you that there will be 50 at least different points that you can make collectively to bring better policy. If you don't do that, are you doing the best you can for your industry? Multiply that out again, and we had another 200 people in here this morning. How many members you got, Steve?
Just under 300.
There you go. DFT people, is that a lot of feedback? 300 people involved in the industry, centuries almost of experience in this room. I suspect it is. Please, please, please read that 99-page document. Because if you don't, this industry is going to have a tough time, a very tough time. You think it's tough now. If you don't change it, it ain't going to change. I'll shut up because I don't belong to this agency, this association, but I care passionately about it. This is the second time I've done this conference. I did one earlier in Heathrow last year, and this one. And every single time, Andy, you talked about it. You talked about how special needs people need you. And I'll bet you every customer that gets in a private hire vehicle has a relationship, in the nicest sense, with their driver. They have a conversation, they have a dependency, they have a need. And that consumer, that person, that passenger relies on you people to do the very, very best job you can. I've talked for far too long and it's a Q&A session, I'm sorry, but wow, you've got a huge opportunity to use it. Questions of the panel. Sir, wait for a microphone, it's coming. There's running and all sorts. And gentleman in the white shirt right in the middle of the room, in front of the camera.
And whilst Natalia's getting there, I'd like to thank Natalia and Lilia for running the microphones today. Thank you very much, girls.
Superb, thank you. So who are you, where are you from,
Thanks.
What's your question?
I'm Jeremy from Luckett's. We do very similar work with special needs children to Andy. And as well as being an operator, I also see things from the other side because I'm an elected councillor and sit on a licensing committee out in Hertfordshire. So I like to think I've got a rounded and balanced view. I wanted to ask the members of the panel a little bit more about the testing regime and these 1- and 2-day courses of the type that Stacey referenced that are popping up everywhere, because our experience is absolutely identical to hers. But she talked, and another panelist talked about the content of these courses being inappropriate, which I absolutely agree with. But I wonder if panelists think that actually the nature of the way that these courses are delivered in classrooms, daytime only, in a very rigorous school-type environment, is actually discriminatory, because we're seeing drivers who suffer from anxiety, older drivers who haven't been in a classroom for perhaps 30 and 40 years, those with learning difficulties, saying, and in many cases actually leaving their jobs, going into other sectors because of the anxiety or the problems of going into one of these classroom-based courses for 24 hours or 2 days and having an exam-type test at the end of it. So I'm wondering if, when we make our submissions to the DFT, people feel that we should also be highlighting the lack of any imagination, innovation, perhaps use of sort of video or technology to provide the training out of hours and in different and diverse ways.
Brilliant question. Andy?
Great question. Okay, so in Essex, there's 3 authorities that use the same agency to deliver training. And the training is that poor that there's a 2-minute video on there that used to say it was how to load a wheelchair. And when there was pointed out that there was 12 things on that 2-minute video that was wrong, including putting carabiner wheelchair clips on the spokes of a wheelchair and then jolting the wheelchair to see if it was tight, things like that. They've now named it How Not to Load a Wheelchair, with no further video. Just how not to load a wheelchair. And that same course, same as with Stacey really, is done in 3 different counties or districts. And I said, this isn't applicable in your district. But what they do say is you mustn't, as a private hire driver, you must not go onto a taxi rank and refuse to take a disabled passenger. They think it's all right to go onto a taxi rank and take a passenger. But where Suffolk is concerned, you know, I often hear it said about how disgusting it is that taxi operators and drivers go shopping. Well, I had it a few weeks ago where a council, Suffolk County Council, here's one for you, Stacey, come to me and said, Andy, we're struggling to do these services. Can we contract you to use an Uttlesford driver, a driver that's outside Suffolk, because we can't get Suffolk drivers because the training is that severe that they can't get them. And we've got nobody to take special needs children on these routes. Councils are now going shopping because licensing authorities are making the training so hard and inappropriate that it's unbelievable. So that's my take on it.
Cheers, Andy. I was just wondering, what can we do about that? I mean, here we are, we've identified a problem. There's a real problem with training. We've got an association here with huge amounts of experience that can offer advice, guidance, create video content, make things more easy to understand because you guys get it better than anybody else. Can we take that into our own hands, or is this part of a government contract or local authority contract? Is there anything we can do?
Well, look, we need to lobby local authorities to actually train for what needs to be trained. But many of them don't listen. And in the words of I will name him, a Braintree licence officer, who turned around and said the biggest problem with licensing, his words, not mine, is that there's too many people like me about that was an ex-policeman that just wants to make things tougher and tougher and tougher so it's not on my watch. That was his words, not my words. He's seen the shortcomings of it. Milton Keynes saw the shortcomings of it when they made it so tough that people went licensing in Amersham and went back to work in Milton Keynes, and Milton Keynes had no licensed drivers. We need to get the district councils to understand that licensing is about safeguarding, and safeguarding needs to be reasonable training and good policies.
Yeah, okay, thank you, appreciate that. It's a bit like a marriage, I guess.
I'm just going to come in with what needs to be done. It's engagement. We try to engage with councils. We're engaging with several councils, but some councils are very difficult to engage with. It's my way or the highway. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that many years ago my cab company had a national training award, an Investors in People standard. So training runs through my DNA. Some of the training I've seen, or the alleged training I've seen and the testing I've seen, is wholly inappropriate to the jobs that people are doing. And it's part of the reason, and it's a considerable part of the reason there is a shortage of drivers. Because people are being asked to do courses, chauffeurs are being asked to actually work out if they can give a change of a 10 out of a tenner. They don't handle cash. All of this is a nonsense. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. The private hire industry in particular is very diverse, from special needs, it's got chauffeur, it's got executive, it's got minicab. And it needs to have training that's fit for purpose. And one of the main things that the LPHCA is going to feed back is the need for training to be absolutely appropriate. And it is covered within the best consultation thinking. The training problem is a major problem, unnecessary training and testing, making people do tests and go through hoops in a one-size-fits-all training. So what we need to do is engage, and one of the key ways of engagement is to actually get your thoughts into the DFT by completing the consultation. So thank you.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Let's look. Oh, you, sir, right in the middle. Thank you very much.
Mark Burser, Professional Driver Magazine. It strikes me that what we're looking at here is a lot of very granular issues that are causing problems at a very low level. And then the problem really that the DFT is presenting us with, or the potential solution, is a top-down approach. Should we not be looking at something similar to PSV or HGV licensing, where specialised vehicles and specialised drivers can be licensed at a national level to a similar standard, where there are absolutely detailed, specific specialist jobs within those spheres, like hazardous chemical drivers or refrigerated drivers of food, where special laws and training can be applied at a local level or at any level to make that sort of thing work. Is it beyond the wit of this industry to put together our dream ticket national policy for taxi and private hire licensing for vehicles, drivers, standards, and everything, and almost present that as our consultation from the industry as to what we want?
Great question. Thank you, Steve.
I'll give a quick response to that. We spent 3 years doing it with the Law Commission, and there was wide-ranging recommendations. There was a draft bill published, and there hasn't been the parliamentary time to deal with it. Many of the Law Commission's recommendations are as good today as they were when they did their research from 2011 to 2014. We have had the task and finish group, and I'm pleased to say that that has led to some statutory guidance, and it's probably led towards this current consultation. But we have actually done 3 years of setting out our dream scenario. Much of it was realised in the Law Commission review, which was commissioned by the government, and nothing has happened. Now, I regularly, with others sitting here, say national standards are a recommendation, national licensing, the whole framework is there. A draft bill was published. Normally, the government, within 6 months of a draft bill, consider it for an Act of Parliament. 2014, clock's still ticking. So that's the answer to that, Mark. And we've already set out many of the things that would make us in a far better place today, and nothing's happened. That's why this consultation is important, and following this consultation, the industry has got to get its act together, otherwise there won't be an industry, in my view. So that's the answer.
Thank you, Steve. Sobering words. Sir.
Hi, my name is John Garden from the Take Me Group. Those that know us know that we're buying companies all over the country. And Steve, you're probably one of the most sensible chaps I've ever heard. The council, the chap from the council licensing, one thing I will say to you, one of the things I was listening to, as you said, the safety of the public is our #1 priority. We bought 2 companies in Plymouth. We can't get a driver through for 6 months. Where's the safety in the ladies and the gentlemen and anybody standing on the corner of the street at 4 o'clock in the morning can't get a car for 6 hours? And I'm not blaming you on this. However, flip what you're saying here. Myself and David have got companies in the East Midlands. I've been on the Wolverhampton courses. The Wolverhampton course, and you may or may not agree with it, they send an ex-policeman. I've been on the course every time with those. They go through everything, Stacey. They go through the disabled, they do everything. Those drivers get a badge in 5 to 6 weeks. Okay? So why isn't the industry taking the Wolverhampton essence and spreading that? Now, I've spoke to the licensing guys that come and train. They're ex-policemen, they're ex-30-year jobs, all the rest of it. And they train those guys to a very good standard. We've got 100 drivers a month coming through at the moment. But we can't do it in Plymouth. We can't do it in Scotland. We can't do it in the southwest. Why? Because they have the 1976 Act, I won't swear, that they bring out and say you can't do it this way. If Wolverhampton can do this, why can't they roll that out to every single council? And no disrespect to the licensing officer, we have got a list of complaints for the last 6 months in Plymouth for people waiting 6 hours for a taxi. So where is the safety for the customer when the licensing authorities are not allowing our drivers to be badged? And 9 out of 10 of these guys, and I get that there might be the odd one, but there should be a nice, easy way for drivers to come through those courses. And 3 months down the line, then start all your extra checks if you want to. A DBS. We do a DBS, we do a driving assessment. Great, get that through. Wolverhampton badged drivers within 4 to 6 weeks. Now, my understanding, and people can tell me they're now one of the richest councils in the country. I wonder why, but why can we not take that? The guys there are offering, they're putting their hands in the air to me and David, say, we'll go all over the country, do it, John. If the licensing officers in those places will do it the way we're doing it. And it's very, very good. We're taking on 100 drivers a month through those courses. Okay, so why can the rest of the country not get on board exactly what they're doing and mirror it? And I get your point as well. We've got a lot. We can't take them on because it takes extra time to train these drivers. A separate course, like this gentleman just said. If you've got disabled drivers, and you put your hand in the air with 25 people on each course and say, we've got 5 places for disabled drivers. Anybody interested? Well, I'm a foster carer. I'll do that. I'm this, I'm that. But the licensing authorities need to mirror what they're doing there throughout the country. And that's where I think we should all be headed. Go and speak to them and spread that out there.
John, thank you. John Garforth, I guess. It's the John Show.
It's the John Show. Well, from this, John, totally agree that what we need here is consistency, and that's what we've been talking about throughout today. Hopefully, as I've already said, guidance standards will bring that, and there are plenty of good examples of good training on offer across the country. Yes, there will be some, and I'm not going to sit here on behalf of the local authority and defend all local authorities and say that they're all brilliant, they're all providing the best possible service. There are always things that can be changed, and I hope that dialogue can be had with those authorities to say, listen, comparing to others, you do need to reflect on what the trade's view of your provision is. And there are obviously different sizes of authorities, and some will be able to do things a lot faster than others. And there are all sorts of reasons why things might take longer. But from the order in which they're done by the local authority, does everything have to come after the DBS? Can you do other things while you're waiting for your DBS? And those are that's just one example of where it can hinge on it going through speedily or not. But I think the main thing is let's get everything on a national level, with everyone being trained and working to the same rules, to the same standards, and get parity and consistency. And I think with that, and with the possible levelling up that comes alongside that in the future, in the next few years, as to whether authorities combine to make bigger taxi licensing authorities, then I think all those things together can only be positive. But I'm not going to wave a magic wand and say that's going to happen overnight. But I think it is important that we keep banging the drum, and where possible, sharing that best practice. Thank you.
Absolutely agree. Thank you, John. Steve, any final thoughts?
No, it's very clear that some national standards are integral to sorting out things in the future, but we do have to address this ridiculous training. We do have to reject and deal with some very, very stupid rules that are there with authorities. We're battling with some, and in fairness to authorities, we are getting some changes of policy. You know, there was blanket ban on diesel. Well, what happened in that authority was that nobody could get licensed because they weren't allowing Euro 6s. There needs to be transition as well. You know, net zero will become nut zero if we don't actually have a path to doing it. If you turn around to everybody and say you've all got to have an electric vehicle, and nobody's got a cat in hell's chance of charging the vehicle at home, or they've got to pay more than diesel for fuel at an electric street place, people are not going to be able to do it. Many drivers, unfortunately, lost their vehicles during the pandemic. I wrote to the Chancellor to ask for an extension to the holiday on repayments. As a consequence of that, you may have seen the famous black cabs in fields in London. Private hire vehicles are the same. The guys couldn't actually afford to keep the payments during the pandemic. The holiday didn't last long enough on the payments. Consequently, they've lost the vehicles. And guess what? They can't get credit now because they're blacklisted, because the vehicle's gone back. We need to address these things. Government has a responsibility for it, and we will keep badgering on at government. But also, it's very, very important that we've got the eyes and ears right now of the Department for Transport. It's very, very important that the people have come here today to speak. It's very, very important that we listen to Stacey, Andy, John, Geoff, Joe, and the rest of the guys that spoke today, because we are here to help. We are here to be listened to, and there is a very serious problem out there. At the end of the day, I'm getting the BBC and various other people contacting me regularly to say a driver's been beaten up because, you know, they've waited so long. There's fist fights going on in the streets because people can't get cars. There's people sleeping in doorways. There's people walking 5 miles at home. It's disgusting. So we've actually got to do something and do it now. I'm hoping the DFT and the Minister, who I've spoken to several times now, will get some action done, because the clock's ticking. We won't have an industry to come back to otherwise. Simple as that.
Thank you. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm going to walk away from that microphone, from that speaker rather. Thank you to our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause. Right, okay, we're almost done. A few thank yous. Thank you to CMAC, Cordic, iCabby, Minicabit, because you're our sponsors, and without you, today would have been pants. Massive thanks again to the Emirates, because I think they've been good, yeah? All happy? Had a good day? Good, okay. Our sound people, Jack, stunning wearing of a beard. Thanks, mate. Our microphone monitors, you've been thanked much, but it's vital that you're here so that we can hear people. The team from LPHCA, especially the unsung heroes, Louise, Alan, Leah, the backroom chaps who've been doing just about everything and running themselves daft. Steve, a legend in his own lunchtime, genuinely, a man who has forgotten more than I will ever know, but is a real ambassador for this industry, and he allowed me to come along and steer this, and I'm very, very grateful personally, because it always makes me a happy man to see you guys working so hard. Most of all, though, thank you to you, because you've given up time today. You've come along, you've given up money probably, because you could have been out earning, you could have been out doing the job, which is so important, and that really matters. And without you, it would have been quite boring, really, because it would have been me and Steve, really, sitting in a room, which wouldn't have been very good. Your can-do spirit just inspires me, because I have to say, if I had all of the mounting issues that you guys have, I think I'd probably say, do you know what, here's my keys. But you don't. There's something about you that is different, and I don't see this in many other industries, and I do lots of different shows. And I can honestly say you guys are amazing. So please take that away. Take away the consultation, because you need to fill it in. It matters. Your views count. Other than that, I'm off to get a cab. It will be a private hire cab. Back to the station, because it's the end of the day. At 4 o'clock, there's drinkies! Anybody?
Definitely.
Right, so mezzanine upstairs, where you got the food at lunchtime. There's a bar at 4 o'clock. Hang around, there's the exhibition still happening through in the other room. I'm John Curtis. I hope to see you again, because you've been outstanding. Go and do your fabulous things, because you're wonderful people. Thank you.